Hello and welcome to the Argus Crude Report, a podcast series on global crude oil markets. This is Alex Endres for Argus Media, and today we're going to discuss what is driving record high prices for Alaskan North Slope, or ANS crude, as it's called at the U.S. West Coast, and how the conflict in Ukraine is shifting trade flows to the region. Joining me today is Benjamin Payton. He's our reporter that covers North American waterborne markets. Ben, thanks for joining me today. Could you start by giving us an update on the crude market there at the U.S. West Coast?
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me. We've seen Alaskan North Slope crude prices rise to record high premiums against the international benchmark Ice Brent in recent months. It's a grade that is primarily refined at the U.S. West Coast, and we see that delivered cargoes have trended higher since September of last year as regional refiners continue to increase their intake of crude to meet the rising demands of transportation fuels as we come out of a post-COVID-19 world. And this, combined with the U.S. ban on Russian crude and products imports, is raising the price for the domestic medium sour grade.
Okay, and what are the latest prices that you're seeing there for ANS?
The prompt month for a delivery of ANS is October, which has so far sold at a $6.75 per barrel premium to CMA Ice Brent. That is the highest premium that we've seen against the international benchmark since Argus launched the waterborne assessment against the benchmark in January of 2018. That is also $6.15 per barrel higher over the last 11 months, as again we see that refinery runs continue to rise to meet the growing demands for jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline.
And what does demand for ANS look like as restrictions ease? You mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic there.
Correct. We've also seen that refinery margins at the U.S. West Coast rose to a record this summer as more people travel and commute to work and school. One of the crack spreads that we keep an eye on when watching ANS prices is the U.S. West Coast 5.3211 crack spread, which rose to its highest level since the Argus assessment was launched in March of 2015 at over $57 per barrel in early June. For context, that's higher by over $38 per barrel from where it was last year. And for comparisons to pre-pandemic levels at the U.S. West Coast, we see that the spread in June of 2019 was just $13.74 per barrel, which would be nearly $44 per barrel less than the record set this year.
Oh, wow, very interesting. And another layer, of course, is this conflict that we're seeing. How is that conflict between Russia and Ukraine affecting the price of ANS?
Well, we see Alaskan oil prices are drawing strength from less competing supply at the U.S. West Coast as no more Russian crude is coming into the U.S. this year. President Joe Biden ordered a halt to U.S. imports of Russian crude and products in early March. The last cargo of Russian crude to be delivered to the U.S. West Coast this year landed at Barbers Point, Hawaii in early April, which was within the wind-down period for existing contracts. And Aframax discharged a roughly 713,000-barrel cargo of Sokol after departing Takashi, Russia, around 10th of March, according to Vortexa. The prohibition also does not affect non-Russian crude supplied by the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which could continue to drive crude into the U.S. West Coast despite the U.S. imports ban.
Okay, and ANS, it could supplement some lost Russian supply to the region. Is that correct?
That is correct. We saw, for context, that Russian crude deliveries to the West Coast, which again is where the majority of ANS is refined, rose to around 99,000 barrels per day last year, which that was around 5% of refinery inputs. Pre-pandemic, Russian crude supply accounted for only around 2% of throughputs in the region. ANS last year accounted for around 19% of U.S. West Coast feedstocks, from 21% in 2020 and 18% in 2019. So potentially around 100,000 barrels per day of U.S. West Coast imports of Russian crude will have to be replaced under the current U.S. imports ban.
Well, very interesting, Ben. Thanks so much for your insight on all of this. And listeners, if you're in need of more in-depth daily coverage of U.S. and Canadian crude oil markets, consider subscribing to Argus America's Crude. You can find more information on this service at www.argusmedia.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode of the Crude Report.